As a Chinese student studying in Canada, I know that no hybridization and no adaptation is too much to ask and impossible to achieve in any transcultural products. But sometimes there can be way too many changes for a culture to actually look like itself, especially between the exporter and importer. Apparently, this is where we find most problems, which I would say are basically Western character design, American humors, and Hollywood storytelling. Let's start with the Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. It's okay, the best-known heroic tragedy in ancient Chinese history lasts only 30 seconds in this movie. And it's okay to have the Tomb of the Emperor as big as the north building of my school. But seeing this creature, may I just say, as popular as monsters can be in Hollywood movies, this, and this are really overdone. If they were just going to make a movie about their own version of a dragon, why bother setting the story in China from the beginning? Personally, I think all the American stories set in ethnic cultural backgrounds have this self-centered habit. It's always some white people travel to some part of the world, eat local food, wear local dresses, meet local girls, and do things in American ways. I'm not Egyptian, so I don't know what Egyptians would think when watching the first two mummy movies, but it's probably not too different from what I'm thinking now. In all these movies, the ethnic cultures are just backgrounds, and what cultures they are have absolutely no influence on the story. But this mummy movie looks to me in some way has done a greater job than others of its kind. Despite the one hero saving the world cliché and the spells cast in English, it actually creates that aura of history. The costumes are way better than those fancy stuffs from some Chinese series. The layout design, the lighting, the atmosphere very well recreate that solemn elegance of that ancient dynasty. So now we're talking about solemn elegance. That's the time to move on into Mulan. This movie is the oddest version of classical Chinese culture I've ever seen. Hardly anything solemn. It's made everything so hilarious and so obviously American. Still, let's look at the dragon in this one, and we have Mushu. For whatever reason, the girls of Disney always have some little things running around them, and the guys with some big-mouth tricksters babbling all the time. I've read about how such characters attract audience, but really, are you trying to tell me that this is a dragon instead of a mongoose? It's quite alright that this dragon is not that mighty or dignified, and you can make Chinese dragons spit fire instead of water if you want, but at least don't make it into a funny mammal. Dragons in Chinese mythology are the lords of all those covered with scales. And this dragon here, I wouldn't even scream snake when I got bitten by him. I would likely say dachshund. Besides the dragon, there are many other things I just don't know how to critique on. I had thought praying to our ancestors in heaven and hoping they watch upon us was something poignant, before I realized they are a bunch of ghosts having beauty sleep and dancing discos. And since when did matchmakers become talent show judges? Also, we would be proud to have an emperor in Chinese history who'd send all his armies to protect his people, not leaving a single guard for himself. But please forget it if they are sent out there just to be crushed. To sum things up, it looks like things in Mulan are just too ideal, and the filmmakers are trying too hard to make it understandable to Western audience. The only moment when I can find any classical Chinese aura is here. A blossoming tree in a yard is a typical scene of a comforting traditional Chinese family, and the part when Mulan cuts her hair is pretty amazing as well. And finally, the Kung Fu Panda. I'm not that into this movie for a reason I'm going to talk about in part 3, but I have to say the Chinese elements in this animation are just so Chinese I'm gonna cry. Just look at that dragon. That's what I call a Chinese dragon. And again, the layout designs and lighting, although not as magnificent as the Dragon Emperor, are still so beautiful in a Chinese way. And I must point out the Kung Fu Panda actually took a step into a very tricky part of Chinese Kung Fu stories, the variety of schools and masters. Here's what I see from a Chinese cartoon, The Legend of Qin. In the north, the most chivalrous heroes. In the west, the most furious warriors. In the east, the most elegant scholars. In the south, the most intelligent geniuses. The fact that Kung Fu Panda compressed them into 5+ characters is a start. And the reason for this compression, well, what isn't compressed in American hero movies? The hero will get attention so fast, and progress so fast, and be the villain so fast. It's all about giving the audience the greatest excitement within the shortest time. While Chinese stories tend to be long and big, in space they cover the entire country, in time they cover changes of dynasties and heroes' entire lives. Here's why the bank scroll thing didn't really work for me. You believe you are and then you really are just because you are destined to be? That's convenient. Instead of destiny which decides the end, Chinese legends tend to talk about fate which decides the beginning, the tradition which are actually carried out in the second movie of Kung Fu Panda. So compared with most American movies using Chinese elements as selling points, Kung Fu Panda is the one to be called a well-made presentation of Chinese culture. In the next two parts of this review, there will be comments on some less obvious but more interesting problems in American-made Chinese stories. Thanks for watching.